going to do today is to talk to you about the 5 steps to application. And basically what this is, it's a pre-screening document for applicants prior to completion of an application to initiation. And the reason why this has come out, and you'll see it a little later, is that we were looking for some way where we can pre-screen applicants who are coming into Lodge for a number of different reasons. And I'll go through that and show you why there are some of those reasons. Now, our goal for the next 30 to 45 minutes is basically to understand what we can do to ensure that we have the right fit between an applicant and their suitability for membership. And we have made certain assumptions. And the key assumption that we've made is that an applicant whose values resonate with the ideas of Freemasonry is more likely to remain an engaged member throughout his life in Freemasonry. In terms of what we're going to talk about today, first of all, I'm going to give you a background of why we've come up with this program. Then I'll say what our approach has been, and there are certain principles that we decided on to look at. And based on those principles, we've designed a 5-step approach towards this process. We've also designed some possible scripts that one can use in your lodge. There's some information for a prospect when he comes in to give it to him to see whether in fact this is the kind of organization that he wants to come to and whether it's the kind of organization that he wants to remain in. And then there's some next steps that we have planned, and then there'll be a question and answer period. Now, our strategic imperative in 2013-2014 was to investigate why new members are leaving the craft prior to receiving their second degree. And based on the statistics we did, and we did our research, we found that between 2010 and 2013, in this province, over 1,600 members did not go on to receive their second degree. Over 1,600 members did not go on to receive their second degree. For example, in 2010, there was 452 people who left. In 2011, 438. In 2012, 397. And in 2013, 307. And what we did after we found that information, we decided to do a survey among the membership at large. And this was a huge undertaking, surveying all the members. And what we did is that we originally sent out a questionnaire to all the secretaries. And we asked them, could you advise us, based on your records, the people who have left between the first and the second degree, could you give us an idea of why you think they did not complete their second degree? We got that information, but what we did in addition to that is that we got the names from all the lodges of the individuals who did not succeed doing their second degree. And we sent them another survey to them for them to say to us why they did not complete their second degree. and it was most illuminating, some of the reasons that they came up with. So based on that information, and I can talk a bit more about this, based on that information, our committee made 8 recommendations to the Committee of General Purposes. And one of those recommendations was to recommend that Grand Lodge engage in a review of best practices for preparing Masons for progression from entered apprentice to fellow craft. That was the recommendation we made. And in fact, I think that might have been the 6th recommendation which the strategic committee decided to work on. So that our strategic imperative for this year, 2014, was based on that recommendation. And what it basically said was to develop the best practices for developing and informing new Masons to reduce the large dropout rate after the first degree. So because this was going to be a huge project in our view, it was assigned not just to the brother-to-brother committee, but it was assigned to the whole membership pillar committee, because we figured it was going to be huge. So we were able to draw a wide perspective and get a number of people involved in it. We did some research, and we reviewed 77 documents on Masonry and this kind of topic. And this was based on our own jurisdiction, the entire Canada-wide Masonry. We also looked at what information there was in the United States, and we also looked in some parts of Europe to see what they were doing so that we can emulate this and see what we can use for this particular project. Our members went out, started to read, and we got this down to about 8 documents that we thought were a little relevant to what we were talking about and looking at. And based on those 8 documents, we further whittled that down to about 2 documents or so that we thought was very relevant to our Grand Lodge and our jurisdiction. And we decided, based on those documents, to develop a standardized approach to engaging with new applicants. Now, there were 3 principles that we decided that was absolutely important to do this project. One was that there should be a consistent approach on how we are adopting this. Whether you are using it in Algoma, or you are using it in Ottawa, or you are using it in Hamilton, or you are using it in the GTA. But there should be some kind of a consistent approach to how all of us will be looking at this project and then see how we can have our applicants go through this process. There are 2 ways that we usually get applicants coming into Lodge. What I call the traditional way, which is either a friend or a relative suggests a particular individual who they know who would like to become a Mason. That's the traditional way. Somebody knows who this applicant is because he has been recommended by a fellow Mason. Then there's the non-traditional way. And the non-traditional way is one of the ways that we're getting a number of our applicants these days. It could be either by looking at films, reading articles, reading books, reviewing stuff on the internet about Masonry, and based on that, people are also saying, okay, based on what I'm seeing, I think I would like to become a Mason. There are 2 other ways from the non-traditional way. Somebody is passing a Masonic temple, and they look at it and it says, oh, okay, I think this is something I would like to become involved in, and they come in, and it says, I would like to become involved. Another way is that district secretaries usually get a letter from the Grand Secretary saying that I've just received a letter from a particular individual who says that they would like to become a Mason, and based on that, could you find a lodge in your district who would be able to take this person? Nobody knows him. None of us know him. So that's the non-traditional way. And based on this, we have designed a 5-step approach to engage our applicants who are coming in. And the 5-step approach that we've designed is the initial response. When you get this letter or when somebody walks in. The second step is determining the first meeting, and I go in a bit more on this. Then there's the second meeting. Then there's social functions that you would invite the individual and his partner to come, so that people in the lodge would get to know that individual. Or then after that, there's the presentation of the application. So we decided to build this so that it will go from one phase to the next phase, to the next phase, to the next phase, so that we can then determine who our people are and what they're going to do. Now, what we did is that based on these 5 steps, we have designed some suggested questions and scripts that people investigating individuals who coming into their lodge, we've designed some scripts and some questions that one can use. However, I would suggest that it's best to have your own words, because it may sound much more genuine. But this is just a template that you can use to do that. At step 1, which is the initial response, you would set the meeting. You introduce yourself. You find out the interest of the individual, why he is interested in becoming a Mason, what his thoughts are, where has he learned about Masonry. And what you can do at that stage is to give him a list of, ask him to come up with a list of questions that he thinks that he would like answered before actually deciding he wants to become a Mason. So you give him a list of questions. Then what you do is that you set a meeting and a time for the second meeting. Now, when that individual gets those lists of questions, you ask him to bring it back to the second meeting based on what he has learned and what he would like to have. In fact, at this stage, you probably can read him out, because he may not come back. He may not come back and says, you know, based on what you have asked me to do, I don't think I'm really interested in doing it. However, at the second step, which is really the first meeting that he will come back to, where you set a time and you set a place. And then you go over that list of questions that you give to him and answer them, and he may ask some more questions, and he may be more interested then. One of the things that you can do at that second meeting is to basically tell him what the lodge is like in terms of the lodge room, where, who sits where, what happens in the lodge itself. The things that you would usually do when you're speaking to an initiate or anybody like that. And you just go over that. In step 3, and this is now if he's interested at the first meeting and he comes back for step 3, you would then have make that a third meeting, a very warm and friendly meeting. And you can introduce him, you can ask other members to come to meet him at that meeting. And it should basically be warm and friendly, and you tell him what happens in the lodge, where there's social occasions that one can come to, so that we can get to know him and his partner much better. So that would be on step 3. On step 4, you now set up some social functions. And we are suggesting that when the partner comes to the social occasion, one can have, probably, a suggestion is probably to have 2 social events that he can come to. I know there is one lodge in the GTA who insists that an applicant comes to 5 events before their application is actually received. 5 events. They can be social functions, they can be a friend-to-friend meeting, they can go to a tournament, a social tournament, maybe there may be a golf tournament, whatever. But they insist that before an application is given, they should come to 5 events. And the whole idea is that they will meet the people, and the members of the lodge would also meet them, or would get to know them, and they would feel comfortable when they are, and they will feel comfortable when they're meeting the people, and they would get to know them better, because in this instance, which is basically the non-traditional way, but it can also happen in the traditional way, nobody really knows the individual. So you're trying to get to know him to see if he is going to be a good applicant to become a Mason. And in step 5, you can then tell him that what will be happening after his application is approved. You can describe what will happen. You know that there will be a committee of inquiry of probably 3 people. There will be some sponsors who get to know him, during these social events, etc. And you would know how things would happen. He also, in my view, should also be told, based on how that inquiry goes, whether he can be approved or he will not be approved. I think this is important, because so often, in my view, we don't tell the prospective applicants at that stage whether he will be approved or whether he will not be approved. So to my mind, that's very important. One of the suggestions we have made is that after the first meeting, we have designed a handout to give to that individual, so that he asks a number of questions so that he would know what it is all about. And based on these questions, we have suggested, we say at the bottom, are you still interested? Is this something that you would agree with? What are you doing with this? So those were the 5 steps that we decided on. The initial response, setting the meeting, the very first meeting that you will have with him. At the second meeting you'll have with him, and introduce him to other members in the organization and have a good chat. You would invite him to go to some social functions, both he and his partner, because this is important. Not just the individual, but also the individual and the partner. Because I have gone out on a committee of inquiry to a particular Mason or particular applicant with his partner there, and we would discuss all the things about Masonry. And then, a couple of days after, we get a letter to the secretary and says, based on the discussions we had, my wife and I had some more in-depth discussions, and I don't think I'll be able to continue in Masonry. So this is important. We should have his partner with him so that she can, or he, can also understand what Masonry is all about and what he will have to do, the meetings he will have to attend, the financial commitments that he is expected to do, and in addition to that, a number of other things. So I was telling you that one of the things we did was that at the first meeting, we give them a handout and go through a number of things and ask them to look at and see whether, in fact, this is something that they would still be interested in. And some of the questions that we ask are, Freemasonry is not to further your business. Very important. I remember some years ago, I was the tiler, and there was an individual who was waiting to be initiated. So I started asking him a number of questions, you know, why you want to join Freemasonry, etc., etc. And without batting an eyelid, he said, because I want to get into the Shriners. Without batting an eyelid. So I said, but why do you want to get into the Shriners? And his comment was, I'm in real estate. I know that there are a lot of people in the Shriners who can help me, and also I belong to a political party, and I know that that political party has Shriners there, and that's where I want to go. Obviously, to my mind, and I think to all of our minds, that's the wrong reason for getting into Freemasonry. The second question we asked is that we say that Freemasonry is not an event. It's not something that you put in an application today and in 2 weeks you are confirmed as a candidate. It's very much a lifelong event, and it doesn't happen today and you become one next week. It takes time, and that's why we've put in that five-step approach, we've put in social occasions and so on. Again, from a personal point of view, I have seen a member comes into lodge with an application, and he goes to 2 members and says, could you sign this? As the sponsor. Sponsors sign it. He takes it up to the secretary's desk. The secretary reads it out. A committee of inquiry is struck, and at the next regular meeting, he is initiated. Now, the person has not been interviewed by the sponsors. The sponsors doesn't even know him or don't know him, and in 1 month, he becomes a Mason. I'm saying that this is not a one-day event. It's much longer. The other thing we talked about is that it is not a religion. Although we talk about the Bible, we talked about a number of things which does relate to some biblical stuff. In fact, Freemasonry is not a religion. And if you figure that it's not a religious organization I want to join, then you're out. Or if you thought it was a religious organization, in fact, we're saying no, it is not a religious organization. Although we may have certain concepts, but it is not a religious organization. As I mentioned, it's a lifetime commitment. One of the things we also suggest is that you are expected to attend lodge regularly. Now, in some lodges, some lodges have 2 meetings a month. Some have 1. But in addition to the meetings that you may have, there are a number of other things that you're expected to attend. You may be on a particular committee. You may be asked to come to some social events. You may be asked to go to a blood donors clinic to help out there. You may be asked to work on Masonic chip. There are a number of things that you know in advance, that it's not just a 1 event a month, but there may be more than one. So are you in fact prepared to give Masonry more of your time than probably just once a month? We also say that there are certain financial commitments, and this is in addition to your dues and in addition to your initiation fee. For some lodges, you actually pay for your dinners. There may be golf tournaments. It may be the Grandmaster's banquet that you asked to go to. There's stuff that there are certain district events that you may have to attend or you may be asked to attend, and they are financial commitments. So you've got to know in advance, am I willing to make these financial commitments when I become a Mason? And these are things that you need to have a look at. There must be a high moral standard while you're dealing with members in lodge and dealing with members in the community. Important is that Freemasonry requires some memory work. Now, this is important because we have had a tremendous discussion in our own committee about this whole question of doing memory work. Do we have to do memory work? Why do we have to do memory work? And one of the things we did in this survey that I mentioned to you, those were one of the questions that we asked. Why do men leave before their second degree? And there were a number of questions that we asked them to respond to. In terms of doing memory work, 49% of the respondents aged between 51 and over said that was the reason why they did not go on to do their second degree, because they had problems doing memory work. 49%. Huge. On the other scale, those between 21 and 30, it only happened, I think it was about 16% said they didn't have a problem. But then we said, why did you have a problem to those 16%? They said, you know, in school and at college, we don't have to do memory work. We go on the internet to get information. We go on Wikipedia. We don't have to memorize stuff. And the moment that I've got to now go and memorize stuff that I haven't done for a number of years, it's not my thing. So that was an interesting contrast. The very young said, yes, I can do memory work, however, I've got a problem. And the older people, the 51 and above, said, I have got serious problems doing memory work. And we've had a number of discussions within our own committee. Is memory work essential? And what type of memory work is essential? For example, is doing your obligations in all 3 degrees in front of everybody absolutely essential? Is when you go to the various stations in the other degrees, memory work on that is that essential. And I think, I would suspect, that we probably discussed this aspect at our meeting for probably about 3 hours, whether it was essential or not. And what we have done is, what we decided to do is to say, yes, that memory work is essential, and you should know this, but it can be done in a certain way, which is important. It can be done in a certain way. But memory work is essential, and especially when you get into the chairs, moving from one chair to another. Another aspect of the survey we did is some people said, when I see members in the various chairs doing work, I figured, and this was the older members, I figure I could not do this. And so Masonry is not for me, and I decided to leave before the second degree. Now, you'll see that one of the things that we are proposing is that same element of memory work. There was a question asked over here in the last session about family and whether Masonry would interfere with your family. Again, in that survey, if I can remember, I think it was about 28 or 29% of members decided that they're not going forward to their second degree was because of family. Is that they wouldn't have the time. Some of the questions or some of the answers that came forward was, I've got very young children and I've got to take them to either soccer practice or hockey practice, or music lessons. These were a number of questions. And to say, based on all of those things, and this came from a lot of the young people, those under 40, said because of this, I don't think I would have the time to pursue Masonry. So to my mind, this is also very important for us to ask individuals, are you in sync with your family? And do you think it would interfere with your family or your career? As Ken mentioned in the last lecture, he said, you know, when he was a chair of the thing, he could not do it because his family was very young. And at that stage of the game, he really couldn't do it. So this is something that we must look at and see. Now, yes. Now, the next steps. What are we going to do in terms of next steps? We talked about memorization. And we are going to draft a document to teach memorization. Now, under the Lodger Resources Manual, I think I can't remember if it's brother to brother or which one of them, is that there's an article about memorization. We think it's a little old-fashioned, so we are going to design something where we can teach memorization to our people. These 5 steps that we're talking about is going to be put on the Grand Lodge website after the July communication, and after it has been approved by the Publications Review Committee, and that will be put on the Grand Lodge website. And what we also need to do is that when it is finally agreed and put on the website, it is going to be sent to all the friend-to-friend chairmen and sent to the lodges so they can follow it, going back to the whole concept of being consistent. There's another aspect that we're working on next year, and we're going to incorporate I'm a New Mason documents, the principles of that. This is something that has been designed before, but we want to look at it again and make some changes based on information we have received, and design a number of booklets, become I am a New Mason, and then send it out to individuals. One of the things that does not really relate to what we're talking about was that we have suggested that Grand Lodge institute a communications model. This is important because in doing that survey in 2013, it was a heck of a problem getting information through Grand Lodge. They didn't have information, or if they had information, the information wasn't up to date. And when we went to the lodge secretaries, they say, why ask me? Every 6 months I send information into Grand Lodge, so I ask me for that information. I don't have the time to do it. And what our committee has come up with is a communications model that will be operated through Grand Lodge, and you would be able to have like this information in it. You have information of when people have got their 3 degrees, when they get their 50-year pin, their 60-year pin, and it would be a living document. And you really don't have to go to somebody to ask for the information and then find out that no, they don't have the information. If I can just let you know who our committee were, I was the project leader of that committee, and it had David Cameron, Dan Hutt, Robin Singh, who is the secretary of the Brother to Brother committee, Charlie Woods, Mahar Eid, Howard Adams, Chet Mangal, Mark Capitan, and Gerald Newell. And those were the people who looked at that 77 documents and whittled it down to about 8 documents.